Okay, good. Welcome. Can everybody hear me? Everybody good. Okay, great. I'm Bill Bennett is my name. I'm an ASC cinematographer, and I'm quite honored to be invited to become a member. The ASC is a more than 100-year-old Society of Cinematographers in the United States, but we do induct members from all over the world. Currently, we have about 450 members, living members. And I'm the first cinematographer to be invited to become a member whose entire body of work was based in making television commercials. Prior to me, you had to have done either feature film work or television episodic work to be qualified to join. And I was the first person they invited whose sole body of work has been in making television commercials. Since then, there's been many others who are either work in television commercials or music videos, and now documentaries as well. So they expanded the eligibility requirements, but I was quite honored to be invited. As I mentioned, I started working in the film business in around 1974 in Los Angeles when I moved there out of college. And I first met up with a gentleman named Ron Dexter, ASC, who was a brilliant director cameraman, and his business was making television commercials, which I ended up working with him. He was my mentor for the longest time. And then when I graduated from working with him as a camera operator, I moved into making television commercials and just stayed there. But before I forget, I want to thank the sponsors. Nanlux Nanlite sponsored my trip over here and fee for the hotel, so I appreciate a lot. And they also, the Nanlite Pavo tubes here are from them. Ari sponsored the camera and the Enzo lens. Ari Rental is providing all the grip equipment, and then also Fisher Dolly. And Wick is, hey Wick, what is the name of your company? What is it? What is it? Oh, it's just J.L. Fisher. Okay, great. So J.L. Fisher is loaning us the Fisher Dolly today. So the way I do this seminar, I've done it several times in many different countries, is if at any moment you have a question, interrupt me. I can see you well enough. Just hold up your hand and interrupt me. Because if we continue, if you have a question, yet I continue on for another 20 minutes, we'll have moved well beyond the subject that you have a question about. So I actually appreciate the fact that you will interrupt me, ask questions, because that way the whole seminar kind of gets steered into an area that interests you, right? Because I've never met you guys. So don't be shy. Just if I say something, show something you have a question about. So what we're going to do today is I'll first start out showing the reel of some work I've done down through the years, and we'll play it all the way through. Then we'll go back to the beginning, and I'll show each one again and stop and start and talk about different aspects of how I did different things. And if at any point you have a question about that stuff, ask me a question. What will slowly evolve is my philosophy of lighting automobiles. In the latter half of my career, it just turned out that I ended up being sort of known as the car guy. I got hired to do a lot of car commercials. And a lot of car commercials are shot outdoors, but then there's quite often some work that needs to happen inside. And I developed a style or philosophy of lighting cars inside that mimics how they look outside at magic hour. And that evolution of how to do that took years, maybe 10, 15 years. But by the end of the session today, you'll be able to light a car that looks exactly like that. That is actually a model car that we lit in a session, one of these seminars, about 5 years ago. So by the end of the day, you'll be able to do exactly that on your own. Okay? So that's the goal, is for me to teach you how I came to the idea, and then we're literally going to do it here. We're going to set up a lighting setup. I have a model car that will light, and the whole concept scales up and down. So we're going to do it with a model car, but you could do it with a real car. Everything just gets much bigger. All right, so let me get started here. Get my computer to wake up. And all right. Okay, so we'll bring down the lights and we'll show my reel. Yeah, unfortunately the house lights remain on, but hopefully it won't be too bad on the screen.
They said I'd never amount to anything. Neighbors, teachers, my parents. They said I'd never amount to said anything. I was too lazy. Neighbors, too juvenile. Teachers, my parents. Said I was too lazy. Too dumb. I showed them. I showed them all. I showed them. I showed them all. Eurojackpot? Thank you. Eurojackpot? Thank you.
Yeah, I got a whole sentence for you. Silverado.
Oh, please.
Hey, big fella, what do you drive?
Ford F-150.
Yeah, and I got 2 words for you.
Yeah, I got a whole sentence for you. Silverado.
Please. Jim, that Ford, look at the frame on that car.
Want to talk about frames, huh?
What do you
Dodge.
drive?
Ford F-150.
Chevy? You want a real frame on the right truck?
Ford
That bad boy's fully boxed.
F-150 is the strongest truck.
Period. Truth's hard to swallow sometimes, huh?
Dodge.
When you learn the truth about trucks, you'll know why only one truck has earned the right to be called F-150.
Hey, where'd you get this? I think that's off your child.
Ain't no doubt my king of the mountains built for tough.
When you learn the truth about trucks, you'll know why only one truck has earned the right to be called F-150.
Right, so we'll go back to the beginning and talk about these individually. So this first spot was, this is Michaela Schifrin. She's a multiple-time world champion, I think 3 or 4-time Olympic gold medal winner of the American ski team. I did this spot. It's for Bose. They make the little earpieces she's wearing. And the director and the agency's concept was she works out all the time, but during the winter there's no snow, so she does other things. And in this case, she's doing mountain bike riding as part of her workout routine. She's got to do it every day for hours every day. And she wears the earphones and listens to music to kind of zen out during her workout, was the whole idea. And so the challenge when you shoot celebrities is quite often the celebrity is very, very busy. And even though this was a 2-day shoot, we only had her for 4 hours in the middle of one day. And of course, like the sun's like directly overhead, the light is really ugly. How many of you are cinematographers? Yeah, so about half of you are cinematographers, you can relate. So they give you at the awfulest time of the day. So I knew I had to do this close-up. I once attended a seminar that Russ Carpenter, ASC, gave. You know, he got the Academy Award for doing Titanic. And I remember him making the comment that whenever he lines up a shot, a close-up of his leading lady, the very first thing he does is he takes off the top light. He says he doesn't want any light coming down from above on his leading lady, making, you know, dark eye sockets and things like that. So I took his advice. I tented over with a 20-foot by 20-foot black and hung blacks all the way around the side. I left the back of it open. The sun is directly overhead, but I'm looking into a darker part of the forest, even though we're in kind of a field, cleared area. I'm looking long lens into a darker part so that I didn't have to overpower the background. The light that's falling on directly on her face is just coming from the sky behind me, and I had an an M18 coming in from back right, lighting her, and it was a really quick piece to do. Looked really good. All right, now all of this stuff is not her. This is a double. So we had a very athletic woman who knew how to ride mountain bike, and all of the previous stuff until you get back to the close-up is the double. Now, many times, it doesn't matter whether you're working in episodic or feature films or doing commercials, directors tend to be very literal. Now, he had this shot in mind and drawn on the storyboard where he wanted to film this couple close-ups of her riding, super close, high frame rate, and have this particular look in her eyes that she's zenned out. And he just assumed that we would do this by hanging a camera on the back of another bike, and she would ride down the mountain bike trail, and we would film them, you know, just basically do it reality. Well, the reality of it is several things. One, she would never be in focus. Number two, she'd never be in frame. And number three, it'd be dangerous. And I didn't want to be the person to go down in history as having the wreck that broke her arm. This was literally 2-3 months before she appeared at the next Winter Olympics and won several gold medals. So I didn't want to be that person. So I'm one of these people that present the challenge to my crew, my key grip, my gaffer, of how we wanted to do this. And between all of us, we came up with this solution that I'll show you. Let me escape out of this. So what we did, we're in the base camp of the parking lot base camp where we're shooting. We took and mounted a exercise bicycle in the back of the truck, bolted it to the floor of the truck. Then we took the M18 and put it out at the end of this arm, you can see here, right? And then there's a grip here waving a branch with some diffusion here, and there's a fan blowing wind on her face. And since we're shooting at 120 frames per second, we only needed 1 or 2 seconds of shooting time to give the editor plenty of time. But the other advantage was the director could now sit on an apple box right next to her. She's not an actor, she's an athlete, right? And so he could sit on an apple box and just literally talk her through the emotions that he wanted to see in her eyes. So we took away the real sun. We're providing the light with our M18. And there you can see her at the end, riding on the bike. And we ended up only doing that like 2 times because we only had her for 4 hours for everything we needed to get for her. So we took the concept, didn't do what literally the director wanted, but ended up with a better solution that I could control the light, he could talk to the athlete and get her to have the emotions that he wanted, and it was plenty safe. And we did it in 2 takes and we moved on. And the grip and electrical crew built this while we were off doing all those things with the double riding down the mountain bike trails. So sometimes, for me, the most rewarding part of cinematography is creating a shot that really didn't exist, but you believe it, right? And so basically you end up with these 2 shots. You see the background going by because it's real background that we were looking into, out of focus, slow motion, with the sort of look that the director actually wanted. And we were able to achieve that safely and really quickly. And to me, that's the most rewarding part of cinematography. Anybody can set up a camera and film a person riding a mountain bike down a trail, right? That's really simple to do. But then to create these that look like they fit into the environment and fool the audience. I didn't shoot the snowing stuff. That's stock. And I didn't shoot, this is CG, computer generated. Now, this is an interesting situation. And it talks about the politics of being a cinematographer, because all of us want to create the very best looking images we possibly can, no matter what project we're working on. In this case, they wanted the athlete, Michaela, that's actually the double, sitting there, and then they're going to put this logo up over the wide shot. I wanted to look the other, we're literally in that same base camp parking lot that you saw the truck driving in. And I wanted to shoot the other direction into the sunset, right? And have this glorious sunset on which they could put their logo, and then Michaela, or her double, would be silhouetted, right? So I didn't have any concern about being able to recognize that this isn't really her. That other direction, see how the hills, the lower the grass is growing up, hasn't been cut. You're looking the other direction, it had been mowed. But there's still a low hill and then a more distant hill and then there'd been a glorious sunset. And it was all going to be in silhouette, right? So I knew that the fact that the grass wasn't going to, the grass was cut wouldn't be that obvious. And if they're looking at the grass and not the gorgeous sunset in their logo, we're like failing badly. So I made the point that I wanted to shoot into the backlight, into the sunset. They didn't want to do it. They wanted to shoot this way because of the long grass. This was agency people, right? I made another attempt at it. They said no, they want the long grass. I gave up and ended up with a really awful looking front lit shot that I had I gave up control. And the point I'm trying to make is, do you continue to insist and be the asshole and maybe never get hired again? Or do you acquiesce, you pick your battles, right? I mean, we got all those other really gorgeous shots of her, and this was the one battle I lost. And it has to do with the politics of this business, and at all levels it occurs, no matter what area you're working. There's always going to be, you're working for someone else, right? You're not the boss. And so consequently, this was a battle I had to give up on, and I got hired by these people again to shoot several other of these spots. So it's something that is often something we have to deal with that they never teach you in film school, about the whole political aspect of this business. I see you're shaking your head because you've run into this before, right? So anybody have any questions about this particular thing before we move on to the next one? And feel free if you have a question. There are no bad questions. All right, so we'll go on to the next one. Oh yeah, there's somebody in the back. If you'll give him, thank you.
Well, thanks first of all for everything. And my question is more about, like, for the what is it, the truck thing that at the back. Did you have any prep, or you just hoped it would work that day? Like, how much prep do you get in such scenarios with agencies, let's say?
since this was shooting in Vail, Colorado, and I had never worked with this key grip before or this gaffer, we talked about it on the telephone. They had seen the storyboards, so they had saw the little drawings. And they brought all the pieces. And my philosophy, these people, I'd never worked with them before, but they came recommended by friends. And my philosophy of working with crew is you don't tell them how to do something, you tell them what you want it to look like. And I said, we want to do this in the back of a truck with a exercise bicycle bolted down. And, you know, we're going to put the light at the end of it. But I didn't get into the detail specifics. I let them work that out. And the camera actually was on a gimbal so that we could do little gentle moves and things like that. And that was basically what I had said. While we were doing in the forest, filming the double, riding the bike down the hill, they were in base camp building that in the morning. And then just before lunch, Michaela shows up, and we had her get on the bike, and we fine-tuned it a little bit and did it. So I'm a huge fan of basically telling the crew what you want it to look like and then letting them be creative in terms of bringing all the pieces. I didn't get down to the specifics of how many pipe clamps they needed and all that. As soon as you start doing that, your crew just stops being creative and helping, and they wait to be told what to do. And all of a sudden now you're micromanaging 20 or 30 people, which you can't do. And then the other aspect of it is you're, in a sense, insulting them. And if you've allowed the crew to become part of the team, then when you're stuck and you've got like 2 more shots before sunset that you've got to achieve, the crew that you've been insulting for 2 days will look at their watch and go, you know, I don't think Bill's going to get done today. But the crew that you've made part of your team, they will really pull for you and make sure your day gets done. You know, they realize you've got 2 more shots, you've got 20 minutes, right? And they will put in the extra effort if you've been making them part of your team all the way along. They will continue to be part of your team. Does that make sense? Was there another question? Yes, sir, go ahead.
I had another question.
Yes.
There was a shot a little before this.
Okay, let me
where
go
you had
backwards.
Some grass in the foreground, almost like a macro shot.
Oh, yeah.
And I was just wondering, because I thought it looks really beautiful.
This shot?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, maybe I saw that wrong. I thought that you saw that we saw the bike going by in the background. But
I think it does go by in this shot. Let's see. There.
Is this a real shot or is it composited somehow?
No, that's real.
Oh, okay. Cool.
And we had 2 cameras there shooting. I was operating one. I had an operator. And at some point, I saw that and said, this would be cool. We had the double go up and down the hill multiple times. And I just saw that shot. And so for one pass, I just did that. Yeah. It was just right in front of me. I just tossed on the long lens and did that. The amazing thing about Michaela was we're at 3,000 meters or something like that. We're way high in the mountains. She lives there. And there were a few times she actually rode the bike down. So we filmed her in close-up going past. For us to walk like 100 meters, we were dying, right? She would ride the bike down, then ride the bike back up the hill and would not be out of breath, right? Amazing athlete. And she'd be standing there having a conversation with the director, and we're all having trouble breathing, right? So yeah, she was pretty amazing. But yeah, it's a good question. It was just one of those opportunities. So many, the word for it in English is happy accident. You see it, and you take advantage of it. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other? Yeah, there's one more here.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about especially these close-up about the light. I heard you're a fan of M18.
Yes.
You used it for the other one as
yeah,
well?
this was made in an era before LEDs.
Yeah, okay.
So HMIs were
because of the output, I asked myself.
Yes.
It's just the experience you have. You know which gears you're choosing, or especially for these
well, I knew what size portable generator we were going to have, and the M18 is very efficient light for the amount of power you need to put into it, and it's a tremendous tool. And again, I followed Russ Carpenter's rule. So I took away all the top light, and then brought in this. The little bit of edge that's happening is natural. It's coming back from the back. We had only one light
And then
this.
you just softened it out, and that's all you
That's
did?
correct. Yeah, there's just out of frame on the left is a piece of diffusion, and then just behind that is a person waving a branch to make it flicker a little bit, and then we were blowing wind at her to make her hair move a little bit and things like that, but with a fan.
Okay, yes.
Making wind.
Yeah, and for the other close-up, the first one, you topped out the light from the top, and you lit, and you had one M18.
Same
on the
lighting
right
setup
side.
for both of these shots.
Ah, okay. No, the first one, the opening shot.
Oh, the opening shot. Yeah, there was no light directly on her face. That was just coming from the sky that was behind me.
Ah, okay. That was
And
my
the only
question. Okay.
artificial light was the back edge.
Ah, okay. Nice. Thank you.
And this was 180 millimeter lens wide open at T18 or whatever.
Okay. That's
To
it
make
for
the
now.
background really soft. And I have a really, really good focus puller. The very best focus pullers make a pact with the devil. Right? I mean, all you guys will agree with that. Okay, yeah, there's a question back there.
When exactly did you shoot that commercial?
What year?
Yeah.
This was probably 8 years ago now. You know, time flies when you're having fun. I think it's about 8 years ago, something like that.
So if you would shoot that again, and because nowadays here in Germany, Germany you've got like more everything moving like towards green production and stuff like that. Will you also switch to LED as well?
Oh yeah, I would have probably switched to like the Nenlux 5000, and instead of the M18, the output power is the same in terms of power in versus light out. And you have actually more control because you can control the color and brightness and all that kind of stuff. So it's actually a more efficient tool. So yeah, absolutely. Would we have done this against like a volume wall? Probably not, because that's a whole expense that just for 2 shots. Probably not. You know, we would have done it exactly like we did, with, you know, faking it.
Thank you.
Like that. Anybody else? Okay, so let's move down to the next one. All right. So this spot was shot with a monochrome camera that was filtered to only see infrared light. So the camera starts to see a range of light that your eye cannot see, and things have like dark bushes look white, and the sky looks black. People look like alabaster statues. And see how the sky looks black? So it's a really unusual look. This was done with a monochrome Alexa. Red also makes cameras that can be monochrome. Now, I did a lot of testing up front because I'd never used this before. I used to shoot infrared film back in the 35 millimeter film era when all the commercials were shot, and Kodak used to make a black and white infrared film. That's no longer made, unfortunately. But the couple things that I learned in my testing was the lens designers. This was on the camera car, we were using a 17 to 80 Optimo. And then on the ground, we're using a 24-290 Optimo. The one thing I learned is the lens designers don't pay any attention to how the flare behavior is in the infrared region, because it doesn't matter. Because digital cameras don't see the infrared, nor did the regular color film didn't see infrared either. So they ignored didn't even test for how they behave, but the lenses are acting like they're not uncoated, right? So then it's one of those situations where creatively you go, am I going to try to avoid the flares, or am I going to start getting flares and then I need to embrace it? So I decided I'm going to embrace it. Because when you're doing camera car work, you're moving all around the car. The sun's, you want to shoot in backlight, the sun's going to come into the lens. So I decided, screw it, I'm just going to make something of it. And then when we were circling around the actress standing on the ladder, I decided to point the camera into the sun and just really exaggerate the flares. So it's one of those things where now you're making, you've broken the eggs, let's make scrambled eggs, right? The other challenge is the wavelength of infrared light is longer than the wavelength of visible light, so the focus marks are not accurate anymore. On a prime lens, you can actually offset the witness mark and use that as the distance. But zoom lenses are no longer parafocal. They don't hold focus when you zoom. And a lot of this was shot, most of this was shot with zoom lenses. So my camera assistant earned their money this day because I had to like tell them which direction I was going to zoom at any given moment, and they would just automatically start compensating for the fact that the lens was sort of failing. I mean, you could build a lens that would be parafocal in the infrared region. It'd cost you $100,000 and it'd get used for one show. So we used stock zoom lenses filtered. So let me describe, let me escape out of this and go over here. So you guys remember from your physics class that this is the spectrum of energy, right? On the left is cosmic rays and X-rays. Then when you get closer to the visible light area, you have ultraviolet light, the stuff that gives you sunburn. Then in the middle, you have this very narrow spectrum that your eye can see. And then just adjacent to that is infrared. So what we ended up doing was taking the monochrome camera, which had its optical low-pass infrared cut filter removed, and on the back of the lens I had glued on a piece of Ratten gel, which is called 87C, which blocks visible light and only passes infrared light. So now the camera sensor is only seeing the infrared light and gives you that really interesting ethereal world. The reality of it is, if a sensor in a camera is not filtered at all, it's seeing ultraviolet light, visible light, and infrared light. It's just that the camera manufacturers very carefully filter the sensor so it sees the spectrum that you see. Then this is remember we talked about the focus issue. Back in the days when we used to shoot film, infrared, you had to be able to compensate for the offset and the focus. And still camera lenses, older ones, if you look at them, they have a little R or a red dot off to the side. And the way you would use it is you would eye focus the camera. In this case, the distance was like 15 feet, the green number. And then before you took the photo, you'd move 15 feet over the red dot or the R, and that would assure you that it was now in focus for infrared photography. What it was doing is moving the optical cells away from the sensor or the film sufficient amount to compensate for the longer wavelength of light. You can see from this, as we go this direction, wavelength is increasing down here at the bottom. So the wavelength is longer, so the focus changes. The challenge is, this is a zoom lens. It focuses by rotating the barrel and zooms by sliding it in and out, telescoping in and out. And you can see that the witness mark for visible lights is, it's like we're in the train station, the trains are leaving. So notice the witness mark for the visible light is a straight line. They did a good job of designing this lens. But notice the witness mark for infrared curves. So that means if you focus the lens at one focal length and then without changing the focus setting, move to another focal length, it goes out of focus, right? Well, that same thing happened with our zoom lens, except they didn't give us the benefit of the curving witness mark. So my camera assistant had to know which direction to turn the focus wheel. He had the other added advantage in that he's looking at a digital image coming off the camera, so he could see if the images were in focus. Everybody understand what's going on there? Cool. This is the train going to Vienna. Okay, so this is a schematic of a digital camera. Of course, you have the lens on the left. In front of the sensors on the right, that blue thing is a sandwich of several things. The sandwich consists of low-pass filter, an IR infrared absorbing glass, another low-pass filter, and the sensor. Now notice that it's doing the low-pass by a polarization process, right? So it polarizes horizontally, goes to the infrared absorbing glass. There's a wave plate that removes the polarization from the first polarizer, goes through another polarizer, it gives us a ghost image in the vertical dimension, goes onto the sensor. And the reason that digital cameras do that is to eliminate moire. So virtually every digital camera, still camera and cinema camera out there has an optical low-pass filter to prevent the camera from doing moire. And what happens is if the pixels or the photo sites tend to match the pattern of a pattern that's in the image, you start to get this beat frequency, right? So occasionally you'll get moire that's not caused by the sensor or the optical low-pass filter. It's actually built into, like here, this chair on the right has 2 layers of mesh that's causing this moire. To me, it's kind of irritating to see. I would talk to the set decorator and say if I could trade that out. Here's a really simple schematic of how a Bayer mask works. Down below, the gray things are the photo sites, and then sitting on top of it are red, green, and blue filters. Notice that there's twice as many green filters as there are red or blue. That's because there's more green light in the environment than any other color. Interestingly enough, the Bayer mask was invented by a gentleman named Dr. Bayer who worked for Eastman Kodak, which is very interesting how Kodak basically diminished their capability in the digital because they were afraid it would kill film. Well, it ended up killing film anyway. They didn't take advantage of the patent that they had on this. Ended up selling the patent. Okay, this is 2 microscopic images. If you look at the bottom part, this is looking through a microscope at the photocells, and there's several things that are going on here. You can see that each photocell has a little lens sitting on top of it. The manufacturers do that to increase the amount of light, to magnify the amount of light falling on each sensor, making each photosite more sensitive. There's red, green, and blue ones. The blue ones look black here. And then there's space in between them, too. So a challenge for a sensor designer is, as you go to higher and higher resolution, the space in between actually gets bigger and bigger relative to the total area. It's called the fill factor. So any part of the image that falls on the part here that's white isn't imaged, right? Then down below, they've stuck a ruler in there that has scales. Then up the upper image, they've now put the optical low-pass filter between the camera and the sensor. And notice that there's a ghost image of the little rulings offset by half a pixel width. That's how optical low-pass filters work. They create a ghost image offset to the left and also ghost image offset vertically to soften the image. Now, the secret of designing the optical low-pass filter is if you make it too soft, your image created by the digital camera starts to look too soft, and if you don't do it soft enough, you start to have moire. So it's a very fine line of choosing it. Now, I was part of the design team when the original Alexa Classic was being designed and built, and I was asked to look at a lot of different images. I actually chose to pick an optical low-pass filter that was slightly softer than needed because I wanted the camera to look a lot like film, right, as opposed to looking real digital. If you don't have an optical low-pass filter, the cameras can look really digital and too harsh. Does everybody understand what's going on there? Okay. Changing subjects. In this world now, we have sensors of all different sizes. When I first started in the business, we basically had 2 sizes. We had Super 16, we had 35 millimeter. But now you have cameras with sensors, little tiny ones, great big ones. There's a lot of discussion about focal length and what the proper term is angle of view, how much you see. So if you were to take an 18 millimeter lens in this case and a white piece of paper and go over to a window and point the lens out the window and move the paper back and forth and form an image, you would have a round image on the paper. It would be upside down. But here I've turned it over just so it's easier to see, right? That's what the lens creates. And say we're going to do a show where we're going to mix a full frame camera and a Super 35 camera. Those are the 2 cameras that are available to us. So if you put the 18 millimeter lens on a full frame camera, the sensor sees that, right? Now, if I take that same, both cameras say have a PL mount. I take that same 18 millimeter lens and go put it on the Super 35 camera, it looks like that's the part of this, that's the size of the sensor. The focal length did not change. It's still 18 millimeters. What changed was the angle of view that focal length sees. So I use an app called PCAM. If I start having to match angles of view between different size sensors, it's an amazingly useful tools available in the App Store. And one of the many things that it can do is allow you to match image angles of view for different size sensors, tell you what focal length to use. Then along comes these things called speed boosters. These are image size reducers. So without the speed booster, you're seeing this, but on the Super 35 camera, the little boy on the left is not seen and the little girl's hand is out of frame. So what you do is you add the speed booster, which reduces the size of the image circle, and now all of a sudden the little boy is visible, the little girl is completely visible, but the image is no longer usable on the full format camera, right? Because now it's too small. And just because of the physics of it, when you take a bigger circle and compact the light into a smaller circle, you gain light. So the lens magically becomes faster. It's just physics. But now there's the opposite of these two, because there's a whole line of classic zoom lenses out there that Ingenue and Cooke made that are actually gorgeous. But if you try to put it on a full frame camera, you have a circle in the center. So there's now companies that make expanders that you put on the back of the lens and it blows the image up to where it covers full format. Of course, there's a penalty, right? There's a trade-off. It's probably a better way to say it, in that when you make the image circle bigger, you lose light. Just like back in the day when you added a doubler on the ends, you lost a 2x doubler, you lost 2 stops of light. It's just the physics of it. Well, the expanders are like doublers, but they're just better, higher quality near the edges because they now know you're going to be using it. Everybody understand what's going on here? Okay, great. Do you remember when we were talking about the polarization of the optical low-pass filter? It's really important when you're renting gear. There might be polarizing filters given you which come from the film era that are linear polarizers. You want to specifically make sure you're getting circular polarizers. It has nothing to do with the shape of the filter. It has to do with the fact that there's a quarter wave plate cemented on the back of it, right? And why is that important? Is, if you remember this image I showed you a little moment ago, here, the yellow cell on the left and the purple one, or magenta one here in the middle, are polarizers. And they do the optical low-pass filter by polarizing the light. If you've got an old-school polarizer in front of the lens, it actually eliminates that, and now all of a sudden, you could have this happen even though the camera is set up properly. Say you've done all your wardrobe costuming tests and your lead actor wears this beautiful houndstooth jacket, right? And you shoot your whole show and now all of a sudden you come to the shot where you mount the camera on the hood of a car and now you have to look through the windshield and you put on a polarizer to get rid of the windshield reflection and now your actor's jacket explodes into moire. And you go, what the hell just happened? I tested all of this, right? Well, what you didn't test was the old school polarizer. If you use a circular polarizer, you won't have this problem, okay? So it's just something to know. Let's jump back through this. All right, here's also pretty much all neutral density filters now, and the neutral density filters that are built into the shuttles behind the lens and cameras are both ND and IR cutting. But you could still occasionally run into old school ND filters from the film era, and it could cause you some problems. So here's an image that's shot properly exposed. There's no filter at all, right? Notice the color. See, there's red, like dark blue and yellow feather boa up here. There's a black stuffed animal, a little dog, and then there's some black cloth over there. If you choose for creative reasons, you want to open up the iris and put an ND filter in front of the lens, and it's an old school, prior to the digital era, ND filter, some really bizarre things start happening. The boa feather boa now looks purple, and the stuffed bear is now dark brown, and so is that cloth over there. So if you have any of your actors' costumes that maybe have some of these colors or fabrics in it, things are going to start looking really bad. So the solution is, if you see this happening, now you know what's happening, and the solution is to make sure you're using properly constructed IR/ND filters. With all the new stuff you buy but you might be working with a rental house that has stock from 25 years ago, before the digital era. So if you see it happening, you immediately know what's going on. And now notice that the bear remained black, and the feather boa is blue, and the cloth over there looks the correct color. Let me describe what's happening. So I made a schematic here. On the left is the lens, on the right is the sensor. In front of the sensor is the IR cut low pass filter. You're controlling the exposure here with the iris, which is that strong vertical black line in the middle of the lens. And then I'm simulating visible light is blue and infrared light is red, and there's equal amounts coming into the lens. But because the iris is metal, it blocks both the infrared and the visible light, and only some of the visible light and the infrared light comes through. But the IR cut filter is doing its job, blocks the infrared light, only the visible light falls on the sensor, makes a beautiful looking image. But for creative reasons, you open up the iris. Now notice that the iris is wide open. You put an old school ND filter in front unknowingly, right? The problem with old school ND filters is while they do block visible light, they are completely transparent to infrared light. So all that red infrared light is pouring through. The visible light's been attenuated. You've opened up the iris, right? And now that infrared light is pouring in, and it overwhelms the IR cut filter, and some of the infrared light falls on the sensor. The sensor doesn't know what to do with it, so it just makes this ugly reddish brown color, right? Which is close to red, and usually only in the darker areas is where you see it, and only on certain fabrics, right? So that is a huge problem, but if you see it happening, you know what's happening. So the solution is to put a proper IR/ND filter, which blocks equal amounts of visible and infrared light. Of course, some both visible and infrared light comes through. The iris is still wide open, but now the infrared light's been attenuated to the point where the IR cut filter can properly cut it. It doesn't get overwhelmed, and only visible light falls on the sensor. Yes, sir. Somebody need to...
Hi. Yes, I have a question just because I always remember this comment from one manufacturer. I think it probably was Blackmagic or someone talking about the camera. And now almost all the new models have the OLPF filter in. But at that point, one of the reasonings they were giving to why some of the cameras didn't have it or gave the option to have it or not, was that some people prefer to have the filtering prior to the lens, like not in
Yes.
front of the sensor. And I just
Yes.
wanted your thoughts on that.
Remember how I mentioned all cinema cameras have optical low-pass filters in there, but actually Blackmagic in their earlier cameras did not. And the reason why they did it is they wanted their cameras to appear sharper, which if you don't have an optical low-pass filter, it just magically appears sharper. But you could run into this moire problem, and you would solve it by adding diffusion on the front of the lens. I think they did it for economic reasons. It's just, they try to make their cameras less expensive. But now the more modern cameras that Blackmagic makes do have optical low-pass filters. They have to have the infrared cut filter in there. And then like Nikon in their still camera line, you can choose to buy a camera that has an optical low-pass filter or doesn't. So you can get like super high resolution images if you're doing scientific or astrophotography, something like that. You have your choice. But it's a good question, and I didn't mention the fact that Blackmagic is the outlier. Used to be. But those cameras are still around, and they actually are phenomenal cameras. I mean, for one of my favorite cameras is what they call the pocket cinema camera. Unfortunately, you have to have a bigger and bigger pocket every time they make a new iteration of this camera. It used to start out, the camera was the size of an M Leica, and now it's this gigantic thing, but still, great camera and cuts really well with, Venice or Sony A camera stuff, if you got to have a small camera to cram somewhere. Anybody else have a question about this? It's just things to know about. If you see stuff happening, now you know what's happening. And then what happened is the camera started building systems, the camera manufacturers started building systems to put the filters behind the lens. And the advantage is, number one, they can tune the filters to where there's no color shift between them, because it was really hard. I helped Tiffen and Schneider both design a test. I didn't design them. Test infrared blocking color filters, and it was really hard to make them so they didn't shift color as you went from one ND to the next. Well, the camera manufacturers, Sony, Arri, all these companies now have a set of filters. The older classic cameras, they're mechanical. You change them out, but the newer cameras, there's a shutter wheel or filter wheel that goes in there. So I have something called CRS disease, can't remember shit, so I actually put in my PowerPoint what I'm supposed to do next. So I want to go back into the reel and show you the next part. And it starts to get into the meat of what this whole seminar is about. Let me go past this. Oh, this was great fun. I'll talk about this a little bit. So this was a commercial made for Europe for the lottery here, and the director, a lot of them are eccentric. This is not a BMW with a sidecar. This is a Ural motorcycle with a sidecar made, I think, during the Soviet era. So it's an antique motorcycle, right? I've learned a long time ago that if you've got a vehicle that's critical to your story, you need to have two of them. Because if it breaks, now what are you doing? We had one day out in the desert north of Los Angeles to shoot this commercial. And I said to them, why don't you just rent the BMW? It's going to be a lot more reliable. You can get parts for it. We can easily find two of them. He said, no, it's got to be this one. It's all like. So and the other thing I insisted on, I wanted two of them, and I also wanted a motorcycle mechanic to come with it. So if you've got picture cars that are critical, you need to have a mechanic, because particularly if it's an older car, it's going to break at some point, and then you're not shooting anymore. So they couldn't find another one, but they did bring the mechanic, and it ended up saving our ass. These are the actors. The mechanic worked out a way to lock the throttle, so that you notice he doesn't have his hand on the throttle, and he's steering the bike along with his feet. So that was kind of cool. So we did that, and then we put the bike on a trailer and shot all these things. Now here's the interesting thing that we didn't anticipate. When you're doing this stunt of driving the motorcycle onto the ramp and into the back of the bus, at this point in time, the motorcycle wheel is doing 40 kilometers an hour. Now it's doing 0. So the motorcycle wheel, with all of its inertia and the inertia of the drivetrain, went from 40 kilometers an hour to 0 kilometers an hour in one instant. So while we were in the bus at noontime, when the light was awful and we're doing all that dancing around inside the bus, the stunt crew was out with the ramp attached to the back of a truck and practicing with the stunt people to ride the bike up onto there. Well, during that process, they destroyed the transmission in the motorcycle, and we didn't have another one, right? So, and we only had one day to shoot. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, God, what are we going to do? So I asked the mechanic if he could take enough of the transmission apart so that the bike could at least roll, right? So what we did was, after lunch, I noticed that this road is a great place, and if you ever want to find it, remember the movie Kill Bill? There's a church out in the middle of the desert north of Los Angeles called Kill Bill Church. It's famous, and you can go visit it. This road is just to the east of there, and it's fantastic because it runs for several kilometers to a complete dead end, perfectly paved like this. And if you take out a permit to use this road, the highway patrol, our local police, will block the road, and you have free reign of this road, right? Which is perfect for doing this kind of stuff. There's no traffic. You don't have to worry about anything. It's very safe. But then what happens is I remembered that there was a hill at one end of the road on the way down into the road. So you notice that we're now rolling the bike downhill. They would actually start at the top of the hill. The bus would drive very slowly. They would push the bike to get it started. It would build up speed. They're literally coasting. And then these very brave guys are coasting and then run up the ramp. And the crazy thing is, there's no opening in the back of the bus. We faked that idea. So they literally run into the back of the bus and hit it like that, right? So we do that shot 2 times. Both times it sort of ends up like this. And then the agency people, being incredibly literal, are saying to me, well, we need to do it again because we can keep seeing the back of the bike. It didn't really disappear. And I reminded them, this is one of those times where I kind of put my foot down. I reminded them that at the end of this commercial, you're doing a computer-generated airplane. You could certainly afford to have your visual effects crew or post-effects crew hide 2 frames of the motorcycle at the back. As it turned out, the cut happened so fast, they cut away so quickly you don't even notice that the bike doesn't fully disappear. So it was one of those things where they wanted me to do it like 3 or 4 more times. Again, risking the stunt crew, maybe not getting it, and wasting time, because now the sun's going down, right? All this stuff we did inside the bus while the middle of the day, I had to create the illusion that the back of the bus is open, that they've parked the bike back there and now gotten off, and somehow magically they're in tuxedos. So I just put my famous M18 out the back and put tissue paper on that doorway between the bedroom and the front of the bus and just pounded it and overexposed it. So for the few seconds you see this, you go, oh, okay, that's outside out there. When in reality, it's not. Complete fakery. This shot, again, literally, this is the actor. The director thought that this actor, who had never driven a bus, was going to be able to drive the bus and we'd do this for real. And I said, no, we're not doing that. I'm not going to have him drive 2 feet from the camera in a bus he doesn't know how to drive. The thing weighs tons. So we actually parked the bus, and I waited till the sun was low enough, and I found a spot. I'm using the camera car arm, found a spot where I could do this shot, just gently move the camera enough to make it look like the bus is moving. But in reality, the bus is not moving, the camera's moving, right? And for 1.5 seconds. This we did for real, a couple different sizes. This we shot plates for the bus and the airplane, and this is all visual effects.
I showed them all.
But again, it's one of those things where politically, sometimes you cave in, and other times you insist that you move on. Like in that case of the motorcycle not fully disappearing, I knew I was not going to finish my day if they wanted to keep doing that shot, and I put my foot down, and they at the end of the day had their commercial. Any questions about that? Okay, we'll go on. So we get into the meat of what a lot of my career is. So shooting cars on exterior is all about being in the right place at the right time and knowing how cars appear in different lighting angles. We try to avoid shooting at high noon or in the middle of the day. When it is the middle of the day, we're either shooting car interiors or those rig shots of like what we call the badging. This shot I want to briefly talk about. You see this in not only commercials and narrative all the time. In reality, if a car is approaching you, it gets bigger visually, right? But you'll see people who are operating the camera that I'm zooming out as the car is driving along here to make the shot last longer, right? And have a better look at the car. But you'll see people zoom out faster than the car is approaching, and as it gets closer, it actually gets bigger. Gets smaller, which just seems wrong in your the uninitiated mind. So I always zoom at a pace that the car gets bigger as it approaches, and then also I'm doing the same thing when it's going away. I'm tracking with it, but I'm also letting it get smaller. We're doing all this stuff with what was generically called a Russian arm. All right. Car commercial. I just mentioned that it's all about being in the right place at the right time. We have looked at automobiles our entire life. What you don't really realize as a photographer or cinematographer, when you're looking at a car, you're really looking at the reflections in the car. And that's critical understanding to know how to light cars well, either outside or inside. If you see this dark area down here, this is the reflection of the road. This light brown band is actually the dry grass over on the left. And then this is the sky reflected from way over here, off to the left, and reflected in the top of the car is these trees and things like that. But notice that the sky on the left, over on the horizon, there's a lot of moisture in the air. We're like 20 kilometers from the coast, from the ocean here. So near the horizon, there's haze, and then as you get directly overhead, it's darker blue sky. And this tends to happen naturally in most parts of the world. Only when you get to the driest desert does this not happen. And it's critical to how I then light cars in stage, this sense of graduated light. Not only graduated brightness, but graduated color as well. Then shooting beautiful looking car running, driving in the road, it's all about the location. So I spend a lot of time looking at locations. We'd hired location scouts to look at different parts of the country. This is kind of like Central California coast. Notice that there's no telephone poles or lamp poles down the side of the road. And that's two things for me. Number one, they're clutter, visual clutter. And two, they allow me to do this kind of shot where in reality, the camera car's down here in the incorrect lane, the wrong lane. We've blocked the road, so we don't have to worry about anybody coming the other way. And then the camera itself on the arm is way off to the left, outside the edge of the road. If there were telephone poles there, we wouldn't be able to do this shot, right? And also same with fences. There are fences, but they're way over off to the side. And then the road surface is not patched, it's perfect. Right? And also has this beautiful shape. By the time I come back here with the crew, I've been to this place 3 separate times. I came here once with the location scout, just me and the location scout, came back with the agency and the director, and then came back again with my crew. 3 separate times and visited each of these places. So I know exactly where the camera's going to be, and I also using SunPath earlier than an application called Helios. For each place on Earth, I know exactly where the sun's going to be. And so you can never be here at the proper time of the sun because you're rushing around scouting, but you predict where the sun's going to be. And then what I will do is I'll cut up the storyboard and start sliding the pieces around on a table. I put down tape for each day, morning light and afternoon light, and based upon whichever light works well and also proximity to each other, me and the assistant director build the schedule. And one of the advantages of cutting up the storyboard is you never forget a frame because they're literally there on the table. And you start sliding them around and you start putting, these are morning shots in all this location, and these are afternoon shots in all this location. And that's how we build the schedule, me and the assistant director. Because it's all about being at the right place at the right time. And then ultimately we go visit these places so many times, each place starts to develop a name. This was called Lone Tree Turn, because there's this one tree sitting down there visually for this turn. Okay, let me go on. Now, my mentor was a gentleman named Ron Dexter. Brilliant director cameraman. Before he was a cinematographer and then later a director, he was in the Navy, but he always really enjoyed photography. And at one point in time, when he was a young man, he was stationed in Japan. And he wanted to start to take photographs, so there was no camera club on the base, so he joined the Japanese camera club in the nearby town. Have you ever seen Japanese art? There's a certain aesthetic to it where things are very, very simple and there's just very basic lines. And he developed this philosophy that I adopted where the perfect frame is not when you've added as much as you possibly can to tell the story. That's not correct. The perfect frame is when you've taken away as much as you possibly can and still tell the story. In other words, very simple, elegant frames. It describes that really well. If I'd had a little bit more time, I would have covered up the sign. We'd throw black duvetine over it and then throw a camo net, military camo net, and then cut some branches off this tree and stick them in the thing. We just didn't have the time to do it. That bothers me a little bit. But this is just a very, very simple image. And that's my philosophy, is have very simple, clean images as much as possible. It helps when you're making a commercial because you want the audience to look at the vehicle. You don't want them looking at the scenery, right? So you try to make it as simple and as elegant as possible. So again, camera car, where camera's way off the side of the road, we can do it because there's no fences here. That shot we already talked about. Now, some people might say, how come I don't see the camera or the camera car reflected in the car? And we did not do any post-production reflection removal here. The secret is always look at a corner of the car, because the reflection's there, but it's compressed into this corner of the car, right? It's compressed right in here, so you can't see it, right? I mean, there's a little glimmer of it right there. You can't see it. So you'll notice that I'm always looking in the corner of the car. It's very rare to look directly into the side of the car. If the agency needs that shot, I'm doing it on a telephoto lens and I'm standing way out in the field, so I'm tiny in the reflection. If we were to try to do a profile shot from the camera car, it'd be this monstrous reflection of the camera car and the camera car arm in the side of the car. I just tell them you can't do it. We have to do it in a long lens from off the side of the road. See, I'm doing it again here. Here briefly, for a moment, you can see the crane, but they cut away. So, like any crew, we always have a safety meeting in the morning and discuss the danger. Yes, go ahead. Can you bring the gentleman the microphone in the back?
Thank you. This is not really regarding the lighting itself, but do you spray paint your license plates?
Oh, well, number one, we take the license plates off the front of the cars.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, well, in many states in the United States, that's not legal, but we do it because it just looks better. And in the back, those are purpose-made fake license plates that typically they're the color of the car with like black lettering, and it's low contrast because we don't want people to be wondering, because these commercials run in the United States, every state has their own license plates that are colorful and you can identify what state it is. So we kind of make these generic looking plates that just go away. Is that answering your question?
Yeah. I'm just like, I find it really funny because like here you tend to use the license plate that is where the car manufacturer is from.
Oh, okay.
Like, for example, if you're like
but
Porsche,
it's still fake.
Then
it's not a real license plate.
No, it looks like a real one, but you can always see from the first letter which city it's from.
Oh.
So if you have like a BMW, that will be from Munich. If you have like a Porsche, that's probably from Stuttgart.
Okay. Interesting. No, they sometimes the three letters and three numbers are typically, and sometimes that'll be like the prop man's initials, or something random like that. All right. All of these shots prior to this one, we're either shooting from the side of the road or we are on the camera car moving with the car. And if the precision driver of the picture car or the camera car driver or the arm operator made a mistake and contacted the car with the camera, it maybe would crack the matte box and put a scratch in the paint. This shot where we're driving toward the car and the car is driving towards us is potentially very dangerous. And whenever we call this a strafing run. And whenever we do this, we stop and we get out, we park the picture car and the camera car in the relative positions, and we have a conversation about what we're about to do. And we make a deal with the precision driver of the picture car that we pick a line in the road. Sometimes it's the painted line. In this case, there's no painted line, so we pick this seam in the pavement, and the picture car driver knows that they'll never cross that line, and the camera car driver and arm operator have to work as a team and know that they're never going to let the camera cross that line on the other side, and that allows us to do this near miss of 1/3 of a meter, something like that, 30 centimeters, and do it safely. And I'm sorry to say that there's been a couple times, luckily before I was working in the business, where a camera crane did go through the windshield of doing a strafing run. So because of that, we are very careful if we do that. All the other stuff, we just do a safety meeting in the morning, everybody's cool. This, we stop and do a specific safety meeting about that because it can be so dangerous. Yes, there's a question right
Yeah, I have
there.
the mic.
Oh, you have the
already.
mic, good.
Thank you. I was just, because we were talking about reflections, your thoughts on polarizer use?
Oh, good question.
Yeah.
For exterior shots, I never use a polarizer when I'm shooting the car because it's all about the reflections. I don't want to eliminate reflections. I want as many as possible. So the only time I will use a polarizer is if there's a celebrity, like a famous person or an actor that they're hired to be the spokesperson for the car and driving the car. I will then, and we've got a camera rigged on the hood looking through the windshield, I will use a polarizer then to see them. But all the rest of the time, no.
If you were trying maybe to do a more crazier camera shot, I don't know if the polarizer would help to maybe get not just the we call it the corner angles, but do other thing, or that wouldn't really help much.
Well, I just avoid them because for me, I just want as many beautiful reflections in the car as possible. Also, if if you have a polarizer on, some angle's set, then as you move around the car, the reflections are going to be changing, coming and going away. I think it would look really odd. So I just avoid them. Anybody else? All right, so now we get to talk about the beauty shot, which leads us directly toward what we're going to do here soon after this. This is a runway. Interestingly enough, there's a competitive company that makes dollies called Chapman. They also make cranes. This ranch was owned by the Chapman company, or the Chapman family. So they're doing really well in renting you dollies and cranes. They own this ranch. They also owned an airplane. So this is where they would land their airplane, and they would let us rent the runway. Now, it is the perfect place to do what we call a car beauty shot, or a pack shot, at the end of the commercial. Down at the end of the runway down there is a big turning circle where the airplane would taxi. There's no taxiway at this runway. So the airplane would taxi on the runway down there and turn around, right? And it's pretty good size. It's probably 40 meters across, maybe 50 meters across in diameter. And it's the perfect place to do a beauty shot for these reasons. It's all about the direction of the light. We're looking directly south, and I'm able to trap the car against a low hill, right? So that means the car is not going to be against the horizon. It's going to be against a darker hill. Then to the right, because I'm looking south, to the right is west, and the sun is going to drop below those hills, but the hills are relatively close by, so it gives me more time because it goes into shade before sunset. If I'm out in the flat, if I'm in the Gobi Desert, I have like no time at all, because when the sun drops below a distant horizon, there's hardly any time. But if there's a nearby hill, it expands the amount of time because you go into shadow, right? So that, and then the eastern sky is open to the left. So then that enables me to do these beauty shots you see at the end here. This. So this is that turning circle. Magically, it's rained moments before we do this shot. We put water down on the ground because it just makes the image look better. It hides imperfections in the surface, right? And so there's a water truck. It's the middle of the summer, so it's really warm. But there's a water truck parked over to the left that, when we're going to shoot, drives away like 200, 300 meters to be small. There is no electric lighting or reflection surfaces in this image at all. And what's happening here is this dark line is the low row of hills over on the right-hand side. And the sun has just dropped below the hills. I was lucky enough to get some low clouds that reflected. And then even more magically, you remember how I was talking about there's haze on the horizon, then as you get directly overhead, it's dark blue sky? That graduation in haze allows you to start to see some shape details in the hood. See that? And the car manufacturers and the designers love that. Notice when the car is driving around in the middle of the day, you couldn't see that at all. But for the beauty shots, you want to see all those details. And then here, notice that this roof line of the car is reflecting the sky above that row of hills. If the row of hills weren't there, the sky behind and this line would be the exact same brightness, and the shape of the car would disappear. So the shape of the car is incredibly important. Also, many cars, unfortunately, start to look alike, so it's critically important that the logo of the car be prominently visible, because they're the people paying for the commercial. And as a detail, it's always important that the logos be upright on the wheels and the air filler stem be at the bottom. So how we organize this is midday, when the light's horrible, we will bring the agency people here, along with the director, and line up these shots. We were able to do 3 cars in one magic hour period. We line them up. We figure out where the camera's going to go. It's on curved dolly track, right? We know where the camera's going to go, and we organize the angle of the car and also the height of the camera. And we do that when the light's horrible. We don't wait till the light's perfect, because there's no time to talk about that. And we get them to sign off on all these aspects. Then we go away with the camera car and continue shooting stuff driving through the forest. And the grip crew is here laying track. The car prep people who are responsible for the car use yellow lumber crayon to make a mark on the ground for the wheels on the far side, so they know where this car parks, all 3 of them, right? And we use lumber crayon because chalk washes away and tape washes away as well. But that yellow lumber crayon, you can get it at the lumber yard. it'll stay during the repetitive wet downs. And there's T marks on the far side with the name of the car, the model number of the car written there so they know which ones. And then we are able to do these 3 separate shots in this magic hour moment. We're able to do this one, and the last one. Now, we always ask them, this was the last one we did. In reality, this one in between was the first one we did. Now, the birds were free. They're not a visual effect. Now, here's the thing where I'm breaking the laws of physics. Regardless of whether you're doing narrative or making commercials, if you want to draw the viewer's eye, you have the brightest light on whatever it is. So notice that this line down the side of the car is brighter than the sun slamming into this hill up here. And I'm doing that with graduated filters. And then in post, I'm also helping out too. But I'm doing it in such a way where it's subtle enough to where when you see this the first time, you don't think about it, but your eye is drawn here. Whereas in reality, this is going to be brighter than this. So I use a grad filter, I'll show you here in a second, to control the amount of light on the ground and also running into that hill. And again, it's part of my philosophy that you draw the viewer's attention to your product by having the brightest highlight in the product, not somewhere else in the frame. Now, some car manufacturers, remember I had the conversation about keep things as simple as possible. Things like this bother me visually. Like this is a little air dam under the car, and there's some back here too. Some manufacturers actually allow us to take these off, and we've even like cut the exhaust pipe that hangs down off the back of the car to take it off, just to make the whole car look visually cleaner and simpler. Honda is crazy about the car being exactly as they're going to sell it, so they wouldn't let us take any of these parts off. And it's just the way it is. But when the car gets changed out, they drive it into position onto the marks, and then they have a floor jack, and they jack up the near side of the car and rotate the wheels so that the logo's up and set it back down. While they're doing that, the water truck pulls closer, and they put water down on the ground, being very careful not to get any water on the car. And then we have production assistance with, we call it a Hudson sprayer. It's an insect sprayer. They're now made out of plastic. You pressurize it, and it's got a small wand with water coming out. We're sort of screwing up here. This is starting to dry out. This is the middle of summer, so the drying out happens really fast, but they're running around putting water down wherever it's drying out. Also, back here was a culvert that drains the water away, that runs down this long runway, but it was ugly, so we took cut grass and sort of made it go away by adding this cut grass back there. Again, the whole idea is simplifying the shot to draw your attention to the car. Keep it simple. Any questions about this? Okay, good. So let me escape from this, tab over to the keynote, play this again. So a lot of people understand this, and oh, you got a question in the back.
Hello, it's me again.
Yes.
So I was just wondering, because it's like an older commercial, maybe it's like the thought process was a little bit different at the time, because what we're seeing at the pack shot is a car lit really brightly. You're talking about the red one that we saw first.
Yes.
And then later on we had a car that was the grayer one,
yes.
But then the background like super grey and like
that was the last one we shot. We were running out of light, but they wanted to do 3 cars. We asked them, which car is most important to you? And we did the red one first. That was most important to them, and then secondarily important, and then third important. Telling them that the last one is going to be kind of gray.
Yeah, okay, so they didn't bother there. Because somehow it kind of feels not kind of right because the lighting's not...
Yeah, well, the light was dying.
They went with it anyway.
Yeah,
okay.
it was a bonus. The most important car was that red one.
Okay.
And then the other ones were there, and we stuck them in and shot them. I mean, it's a choice we give them, and I tell them right up front, the last one may or may not look good.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And was there a reason why you shot the red one with the back?
That's an agency choice.
Okay.
They come with the exact angle that they need, front or back or side or whatever, and then I have to mimic that. And they have still images that they've shot, and my dolly move either starts in that image or ends in that image. Mm-hmm. And so that way they can tell their client, yeah, we did exactly this. So they come with still photos to show us.
Thank you.
Sure. This grad filter, everybody uses them. The biggest problem is if you're doing really high dynamic range, dynamic shooting where things are moving a lot, it's hard to hide the edge. If you're doing a locked off shot, it's no problem. But then if your actor actually misses their mark and walks up into there, now their head's up in the dark place. So my solution is I don't use a grad, I use this, which is called an attenuator. And it's like the filter manufacturer's best kept secret. It's in their catalog. It's graduated, but there's no clear area. It starts getting gradually darker from the bottom to the top. They come in, I think, 3, 6, and 9, and 12. So this one's a 12, so it's 4 stops from bottom to top. And it's doing exactly what you want, because in the middle is where you've made your exposure. That's where the car's lying. And the top is holding back the sky, which is typically too bright, particularly if you're shooting into backlight. And then the bottom is letting more light in, because that's the dark road. So if I'm shooting outside, this is in front of the lens all the time. And then for the pack shots, I actually asked Schneider to make this filter for me, because for a lot of time I was using 2 filters and 2 different filter trays and spending time carefully adjusting them all the while the sun's going down. And then I asked them if they could make this for me, and they said, well, yeah, make a mock-up in Photoshop of what you want it to look like. And I did, and this is in their catalog. It's called Dual Grad. And then I thought about it, do I want the clear spot in the middle? And I said, no, I want it like 1/3, 2/3. That way, if I need the clear spot higher in the frame, I turn the filter over. But if it's in the middle, you can't move it too close to the edge. So they actually made that for me. It's in their catalog. I don't know, it's a secret how they do it, but I gave them a mock-up in Photoshop. Any more questions about that before we move on to the next spot? Okay, great. So let me bounce back to remind us of what that looks like. Okay, this. Some of you may or may not have suspected this car, when we shot it, didn't exist. This is a completely computer-generated car. The reason we did it that way was at the time that we shot this commercial, the car had not been finished. So there was not a driving version of the car. Yet they wanted to make a commercial to kind of let the world know that this car was coming. So the way we did it is we went to this real honest-to-God place in Spain and shot a stand-in car on top of which they put this computer-generated car. So let me show you a behind the scenes of this right here. So this was put together by the director. Come on. This was put together by the director. This place actually exists. Here he kind of reveals how the CG car was layered over on top of the real car, or the standing car. And in a second I'll show you how they were able to make the car look like it had the reflections from the actual location. And we're shooting the stand-in car at the proper time as if I were shooting the real car, because we basically borrowed the lighting from the real car. Now the other thing that helps it be very realistic is they were slavishly tracking the tracking marks, and notice that the CG car bounces going down the road. You'll see it right here. See that? They would slavishly follow the tracking marks, because what gives away a lot of CG cars is they look like they're gliding on a magic carpet. But because they slavishly tracked the tracking marks, and also tracked the camera bounce, it allowed you to believe it really occurred. Now, a really magical thing that's happening here is the light in the side windows here is reflecting the light that's reflecting off the water up here. See that? And that's happening in the computer-generated car. So I'll show you how we did that. Okay, let me go back. Tab. All right. So this place actually exists. It's in Valencia, Spain. Calatrava, I believe, is the architect. This is an amazing place. It's like 1 kilometer long by half a kilometer wide. And they allowed us to shoot there, driving the cars around where normally people walk. And we went and scouted, and we picked, just like we do for any car commercial, where we wanted to be when. We had an arm car with a techno crane on it and a stabilized camera head. Then the visual effects person was also the director, which made it real easy because I could just ask him any question we needed about how it's going to be put together. They just arbitrarily stuck these tracking marks all over the car to be able to track. But then we shot the car in exactly the right time, as if I was doing a real car commercial. Of course, you know, the production assistants would ask the people who were visiting to not be standing in the background. Now, key to the whole thing was being able to know what the focal length of the lens was, because the visual effects people had to put their virtual camera in exactly the same position as the real camera, so that the fake car will fit on top of the real car in perspective. And the way we did that is the Alexa, and now many cameras, can record lens data into the header of every frame. So we had the motors programmed. This lens, it was a 17 to 80 Optimo again. It's not a lens data lens. It doesn't have LDS, it doesn't have slant eye, but we were able to create a lens table using an app that ARRI provides to us, and I could map the lens so that the metadata going into the lens data, they could stop in any frame in post-production and use a tool and look at the metadata and go, oh, well, okay, we're 22 millimeters, the focus is 4'3" away, and we've set the aperture at 8, right? So they can emulate that, and it would help them rapidly figure out where the camera was relative. Now, the secret to well, here, just operating station, I'm using pan tilt on my left hand. I'm zooming with the zoom control on my right. I'm looking at a Rec 709 image on the monitor to the right, but the monitor to the left over here is looking at a log signal, because I always base my exposure on the log image, not the LUTed image, because the camera's actually recording a lot more information in the shadows and the highlights, and I want to make sure I don't clip any of those. So I'm adjusting the exposure so that nothing clips. And if the balance is correct and nothing clips in post, you can do anything with it. But if something clips, it's no longer there, and you have no control of it. So this was the solution to how to create the reflections. This is a red Epic pointed straight up with a 4.5 millimeter fisheye lens. We've put it just high enough to where it doesn't see the windshield, top of the windshield, or the driver. And they would hide around the corner in each location where we would shoot with the camera car, and they'd kind of peek around the corner during our rehearsals and see the path that the picture car was driving on. And then the moment we would wrap that shot and move on to the next one, they would roll the camera and drive through and record the entire environment from horizon to horizon, 360 around 180 degrees from the side all the way to the top. Then the visual effects supervisor would, in the CG world, create a hemisphere, map this moving image on the inside of that hemisphere, and instruct the car to reflect that image, right? So the lighting and the environment that we shot the stand-in car is now mapped onto the virtual car. And here you can see that's the CG car, and there's the car we shot. We used a BM, even though it's a commercial for Lincoln, which is a division of Ford Motor Company, we used a BMW because it had the same wheelbase length and width, and it was a convertible, which makes the roof line lower, and we took off the outside rearview mirrors so that this car would easily fit over that car, right? And you can see they've cheated a little bit on the reflection, but it was clearly recorded from this place. You can see overhead. Everybody understand how we did that? And so, in a sense, my lighting lit the CG car by picking being in the right place at the right time. We did it, every shot was done that way. And the other thing they did that it's not so evident in here, well, a little bit on the ground. If you notice that the environment, the buildings and the surface were kind of dirty, they could have cleaned all that up, but they left it dirty because it helps create the illusion that this is real. right? If they'd cleaned it all up, it'd help. It would make it difficult to believe that this is a real place if it looks just too clean like Disneyland. So the dirt spots on the ground and the stains on the building, they left it all there. They could have taken it away. Any questions about this? Okay. See what the next thing here is. Oh yeah, so I'm going to bounce back. Oh, this is the behind the scenes. Get rid of that. Here's this. See, here's a perfect example. Those stains on the ground, they could have easily removed that in post. They chose not to. You notice how the camera's bouncing and the car's bouncing? They mirrored all the bouncing from the tracking marks and put it back into the car. Now here's something really hilarious. People don't understand how reflections work, right? Clearly this is a center stay suspension bridge. All the cables are over here. So yeah, the hood and the windshield would reflect the cables, but there are no cables over here to the left. But they chose to steal these cables and put them over here just because they thought it looked cool, because people don't know how reflections work. See that? There's no cables over here, right? To the left. Also, you get to do this, which you would never do with a camera car because you would see yourself big time. And we are there in the BMW, but we're not there in this car. Yeah, see the stains in the building? They could have taken all that away. It chose not to. So because when we did this shot, right after we did the beauty shot, the little Mini Cooper with the red Epic looking straight up is just away there. It also drove over here, and somebody over, some production assistant is over here gently rippling the water. So we've got a light pointed into the water. It's making that reflection in the overhead, and then that's now in the side window of computer-generated car. So mapping the environment, people do it in different ways. Some people stitch a whole bunch of cameras together. I asked him about that, and he says, "Nah," I don't need that level of resolution. I can do it with a simple image because there's very low resolution in that reflection. It's kind of smeary anyway. So he says, "I don't need all that. It's just way too much work for me to stitch all that together." So we didn't do that. Okay, let's see what the next thing is. Oh, this was a lot of fun. If you people are from the United States, there's 3 major truck manufacturers. There's Ford, Chevrolet, and Dodge. And they're always competing for market share. And this was a series of commercials that was running where these 2 guys, one guy was a Dodge owner and the other one was a Chevrolet owner, and this is a Ford truck commercial. And you can see the 3 vehicles are parked outside the window, the Ford truck's in the middle. The Ford pickup truck, the F-150 pickup truck, for like 35 years running, is the best-selling vehicle in the United States, including all automobiles, including all Toyotas, including everything else. They sell more of those than any other car manufacturer or truck manufacturer sells. So they don't need to show you the truck in this commercial. Like you see it briefly here and you see it briefly at the end. The rest of the time is just this jabber going on. They don't need to show you the truck. Everybody knows what it looks like. They're just reminding you that the truck exists. And one feature in this particular case, that they claim it has a more sturdy frame. Now, this is an interesting challenge, and for you people who do narrative work, I know you fight to have control of color correction in post. Sometimes they let you do it. You would love to get paid to do it, but many times we have to do it for free because they won't pay us to do it, but we all want to be there because they can destroy your work, or you being sitting there can make it look like in your mind you want it to look like. So there's 2 things that I do to help assure that. Number 1, I absolutely make sure that the color correction of the dailies looks as close to the final as I want, because the editors have sat there with the agency, in my case, looking at this footage for maybe a week or 2, and they get really used to what it looks like. So if the dailies are all washed out and ugly, when they get the final color correction, typically I'm not there. They're in Detroit or New York or St. Louis or wherever the heck they are. They will, if it's all washed out in dailies, they're going to make it all washed out in their post-production. But then I also would do something that my good friend Alan Davio, ASC member, also shot E.T. and Empire of the Sun, phenomenal cinematographer. He came out of commercials and he did something he would call defensive lighting, where if I wanted this scene to be high contrast, because this is out in the desert, they're in a cafe, right? And I wanted this scene to be extremely high contrast. So I did not put any fill in the side. I actually took light away, so that I knew that in post-production, of course, some agency dweeb in the back of the room going, well, can we make it a little less contrasty? And they would try to open up the shadows, and there's nothing but noise in there. There's no image there. So they just save the image, they would close it back down and make it like I wanted. So I knew I wasn't going to be there for color correction, but I made it so violently contrasty that they had no choice, right? Defensive lighting. Now, this person that we see here, the spokesman, is a famous country western singer named Toby Keith. Probably not a lot of fans here in Germany, but in certain part of the United States, huge fan base. And he's a spokesman for Ford. So again, we had him for 4 hours on one day, a 2-day shoot. So everything like this shot, this crash zoom in that we do here, that's all the double. They had a double that was his exact body shape and size. They had all the wardrobe that he could wear, costume, hat, everything. And every shot where you don't recognize him is the double. So we did this crash zoom on one day, and then that close-up of his eye, that's the real person, that. And the person that stood up is not him. That's the double. This is the double. This is the double. Now, this shot, I've done this 2 times in my career, where they have this low-angle shot of the person walking. And again, you don't have a whole lot of time, right? So I could have laid track and used a big ubangi or a crane or a jib and underslung head and get over to the side. We didn't have time for that. I had them put a furniture blanket on the ground. I put a sandbag on the end of the furniture blanket. I set the camera on that. I laid down. The grips grabbed my feet and wrapped the furniture blanket around it and pulled me backwards as the guy walked. And I knew that it would be like a 1.5 second shot. He took 2 steps. Wide angle, like 16 millimeter lens, done, move on. We could have spent hours building that rig for a 2-second shot. Nah, just do whatever works. Do it simply, do it quickly. Now, this is kind of a truth in advertising thing. They're trying to make the point that the frame on the Ford truck is bigger. I can guarantee you, on a 16 millimeter lens, if you put something in the foreground, it's bigger. So there you go. I mean, to be true, it was a little bit bigger, but not that much bigger, right? So a little bit of truth in advertising. Then here at the end, again, defensive lighting. This is the only time you see the truck. And then quickly cut to him getting in. By the way, I'm glad they let him wear sunglasses here, because I am pounding him with an 18K spotted into his face, because I'm looking directly into the sunset. And I have this rule, you don't clip. So I didn't want to clip the sky back there. I want it to be yellow. So I am pounding him with this 18K spotted in, hotter than hell, but they luckily let him wear sunglasses so I didn't burn his retina. And that's the only shot you see of the truck in the whole commercial. Then this happens. Here's an interesting challenge, because I needed to see this chunk of the truck frame, because one jokester asked the other guy, the guy on the right says, where did this come from? And the guy on the left says, well, I think they took that off your truck. Right? Well, I needed to see it for the joke to work. I knew if I lit the holy living shit out of it, because it's black, it's going to look ugly and it's going to make him look bad. So I did the best thing. I silhouetted it. I threw a spot of light on the back wall. And many other people have done that. Night of the Hunter was a classic old movie where at the end the bad guy is harassing the people, and the grandmother is sitting on the porch with a shotgun in her lap. She's in silhouette, but the cinematographer, Stanley Cortez, puts a spot of light on the wall that's the bottom before the screens start, that silhouettes the shotgun. But magically, that spot of light, every time they cut to a different angle, that spot of light just keeps moving around. You don't notice it, but you see that the silhouette of the shotgun. So I needed to tell the story of this thing, and I did it just by silhouetting it. Luckily, we had never seen that corner of the cafe, so I was able to add that little spot of light quickly to help me see the thing. All right, so let me see what here. This was done, high dynamic range is common now, but Dolby invented the concept because they realized the cameras could see tremendous dynamic range, but our viewing devices couldn't show it. X709 standard is 100 nits of brightness coming out of the screen. They built a monitor that had 4,000 nits. It was water cooled to prove the concept, but they needed some images to show at the NAB convention in Las Vegas. We're talking 5-6 years ago, and they approached me and said, we need some interesting looking images that have extremely high dynamic range to show off this monitor. And I'm a pilot. I knew the man that owned this highly polished airplane, and I asked them if we could borrow his airplane and him fly it. And then they hired a helicopter, and we went out over Catalina Island, which is well off the coast of California. Beautiful place to shoot because there's very little built there, so there's not going to be any roads or buildings. And because they have a fleet of these airplanes that on 4th of July and on Memorial Day and things like that, they fly in formation. So this guy was very good at flying in formation because my life is in danger and the helicopter pilot's life's in danger to do shots this close. And again, I told the pilot of the helicopter what I wanted to achieve. I needed the aircraft in backlight, but I didn't want to micromanage his flying to get the camera there. I simply told him, and then he was experienced enough to where he put the camera. We've now got the bright airplane against the dark hillside, exactly what I needed for the client, Dolby, right? You can't get any higher contrast than this. Hard sun coming off of polished airplane. This shot was interesting. We're very, very close. I'm on 24-290. I'm on the 24 millimeter end. We're very, very close to the helicopter. We're only like 3-4 meters from the tail of the aircraft. The rotor blades are passing above the rudder, right at the end, and the pilot can feel the pulses of the rotor blades in his rudder pedals. He's not looking at us, he's looking forward because he's acting like he's landing here. And he said to us on the radio, says, how close are you? And I'm not talking, the pilot's talking. And the pilot says, we're very close, don't do anything crazy. And so we were able to do this really cool shot safely. This is an airport off on Catalina Island that looks like an aircraft carrier. All right, and then we did this shot directly into the sun again to sell the whole idea of high dynamic range. Then this, I'll briefly mention, it was one of the most amazing things I ever did. The NASA invited all of the major camera manufacturers to come to Cape Kennedy for the last launch of the space shuttle system. So we went down there, we took 3 Alexa cameras. 2 of the cameras were mounted in doghouses. This is one of those shots. There was about 1,000 feet, 300 meters from the launch pad. They were remotely triggered. And for me, I'm a big history buff. I like flying. The men went to the moon from here. Launch pad 39A. So I'm like walking around as we're prepping and building, and I'm seeing like surveyors' monuments in the ground with dates stamped in them 1968, 1 year before men went to the moon. This was cool. So it was a lot of fun. A lot of, you don't know if it's going to work, but just remarkable. I was filming with a long lens camera, 1200 millimeters from 3 miles away, about 5 kilometers away. The ground was shaking when this went off. So let me go back to my PowerPoint and see what else is on here, because what we'll do is, I just did that. We're going to skip over this. Well, we'll briefly talk about it. So did a slice of time thing where basically you build 96 cameras in a ring, and then there's a cinema camera at the bottom and the top, digital. In this case, they were red Epics, I believe. So the car could drive in, freeze, move around it, and the car could drive out. So tremendous amount of prep, and then it all happened here. We're setting up all the small ones. There's Canon still cameras, and then there's and we've matched the focal length. We angled it so the car could come in at an angle, and we would do using Helios to figure out where the sun is, because I had to shoot when the shadow of the rig was no longer falling on the car, so the director wanted to know, so did that. But here's we would do a take, and by the time we walked back over to the post-production trailer, they had this. And we were triggering the cameras with a light beam because you couldn't hit the button at the right time. So they had a infrared light beam coming across, and they keep moving the receiver and the sender until it would trigger at the proper moment to do that. All right, so what we're going to do is light automobiles. You saw this way up early. This is a model car lit on stage. But notice that it looks an awful lot like the cars do when you have them outside at magic hour. Over on the right, there's a low row of hills with graduated light. It's warm because the sun is set over there. And then on the left, on the hood of the car, is cooler light coming from the eastern sky. But notice that that ridge down the center of the hood is now visible, right, because of the gradated light.
A new standard of performance.
This was a commercial done long ago, but it was shot in that same place. I would keep going back to the same locations because quite often they just work so well. We had to do this magic thing where we went through the side window. Haven't done it yet. We're about to do it. Yeah, this. Wow. So, yeah, they used to recognize that same runway. At that point, they would pay to put the dotted line on it. That shot at the end was done in that same place. But here I broke the rule. Remember I mentioned that I wanted the top of the car to be against the low row of hills. SUVs, they want them to look powerful. So whenever you're shooting the hero, you look up at them, right? So you always look up at SUVs and trucks. You look horizontal at regular cars and down a little bit at sports cars, because if you look horizontal at a sports car, you can't see the shape. So I'm looking up. They replaced the sky here because otherwise it just blended into the top of the car. Right, here's a car lit on stage using the technique that we're about to show you. It works in profile. I'm far enough away where you can't see the camera reflected in the side of the car. We can do it on locations, like here we're inside a big atrium at a convention center in downtown LA. But notice that the gradated light allows the shapes to be more visible. If we just use flat light, it would be basically just ugly flat shape. And the advantage of this is, hang on. The challenge is the same challenge as if maybe you'll never shoot a car in your entire life, but you might for narrative or do a commercial where the product you're shooting is very highly reflective, like this. So you've got to photograph this. Now notice that the lights that are shining on me are visible in the pot. So you can just keep adding lights, and every one of them you add is going to put a hard reflection in there, and you'll see the light. And then you'll also see the lampstand and the electrician standing behind the lampstand waiting for instructions. So the solution is you don't light this directly. What you do is you light this, right? And then you take this and you reflect it in the object, right? And then you do it on the other side, right? That's how you light reflective objects in its simplest form. So we do that with cars, but it becomes gigantic. Did the teapot tempo. This is 30 feet by 60 feet. So what is that? 10 meters by 20 meters? Something like that. Basically a 6-story building laying on its side. And it has to be seamless white cloth because anything that is interrupting it, like a seam, would be reflected in the side of the car. because like I said, we're lighting these and then we reflect them in the car. And back in the day, at the bottom down here on the right side, we use cyc strips. But notice that it's bright at the bottom and darker as you go up, right? And that's critical to give you that gradated light. And we did it on both sides. Sometimes if they want to rotate the car, we end up using 5 of these flats. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there's one up here above. But notice that there's the emulation of the low row hills with the black cloth. And I would use CAD programs to make sure that my whole setup, the director would tell me what he wanted to move from and to with the motion control rig. And I would make sure that the car and the cyc would be in the proper orientation. They would build a stage to put the car on. We could predict where the big bounce flats were overhead. And I would make sure that, let's say this 100mm position here would not be 3 meters outside the stage wall, which would be a disaster. So I'd plan all this out to scale and notice that there's markings on there that shows exactly where the car is and exactly where 2 corners of the track are. So on the pre-light day, everybody can build stuff that it works. Sometimes the setups become huge. In this case, the camera is 100 feet away from the car, 30 meters, 35 meters, something like that. This is what is generically called a Russian arm. It was actually invented by the Ukrainians. It's interestingly enough military technology that's been used to stabilize cameras now. And they come in different forms and in different vehicles. Remember how we were doing this move smoothly around the car? I do it with curved track that I built myself. The radius here is 70 feet, which is what, 28 meters, something like that. And the secret is that you put the car at the center of radius, so as you dolly around, you don't have to pan to keep the car centered, just as shown here in the 3 different positions. You don't have to pan at all, the camera just stays centered. But like I said to you, this technology of how to light reflective objects got me this commercial. It's not a car commercial, it's a computer commercial, but I knew how to light reflective objects. And so we're shooting this all motion control, just like we do a car commercial. We're filming at 1.5, 3 frames per second, something like that, all controlling the reflection. And I didn't shoot this part. And when we get to the screen, there's like 4 or 5 different passes here so that the screen looks correct and that the body of the computer looks correct. And also they're critical about that reflection. And now my CRS disease tells me to light the model car. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a break for 10 minutes. It's straight up 2 o'clock right now. We'll go take a break for 10 minutes, come back at 10 minutes after 2, and we're going to make a model car look exactly like I showed you in drawings, or in the photos.